Adrian Peterson hadn't expected the board meeting to run 3 hours over schedule, and she definitely hadn't expected to spill her entire coffee down the front of her cream silk blouse in the parking garage afterward. Standing there in the dim concrete space, watching the dark stains spread across expensive fabric, she wanted to scream. Instead, she laughed, because what else could she do? The merger had gone through. Her pharmaceutical company was about to become one of the largest in the Northeast, and here she was looking like she'd forgotten how to drink like an adult. She grabbed her blazer from the back seat and buttoned it over the mess, checking her watch. The dry cleaner closed in 20 minutes, and it was the only one in the city that could handle delicate silk without ruining it. Adrian drove faster than she should have through downtown Boston, her mind still half on the meeting, half on the presentation she needed to prepare for next week. At 32, she'd worked herself to the bone to become CEO of Peterson Pharmaceuticals, the company her father had started before his death 5 years ago. She didn't have time for coffee stains or delays or anything that wasn't moving her forward. The bell above the door chimed as she rushed into the small shop, and that's when time seemed to stop completely. Behind the counter stood a man she'd spent 10 years trying to forget. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that still fell just slightly too long over his forehead the way it always had. Those same hazel eyes that used to look at her like she hung the moon. Zachary Lawson, her ex-boyfriend. The man she'd walked away from a decade ago to pursue her MBA at Stanford while he'd stayed in Boston to help his ailing mother. His eyes widened with the same recognition. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Adrian," he finally said, and his voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher somehow. "Zachary." She forced herself to stay composed, to not let him see that her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I didn't know you worked here. I don't just work here, I own it." He gestured around the small but immaculate shop. "Bought it 3 years ago." She blinked, processing this information. The Zachary she'd known had been studying architecture, had dreams of designing buildings that would change skylines. But then, his mother had gotten sick, and everything had changed. She'd left anyway, choosing her future over their relationship, and the guilt of that decision had haunted her through every success she'd achieved since. "That's wonderful," she said, meaning it. "I'm happy for you. Are you?" There was no accusation in his tone, just genuine curiosity. "Yes." She swallowed hard. "I am. I know things ended badly between us, but I never wanted anything but good things for you." He studied her face for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw there. The girl he'd loved was still somewhere inside her, buried under years of business meetings and corporate decisions and lonely nights in hotel rooms. But she'd also become someone else, someone harder and more focused and infinitely more tired. "You need something dry cleaned," he said finally, nodding at her blazer. "Coffee incident." She unbuttoned it to show him the ruined blouse underneath, trying to ignore the way his gaze lingered just a fraction too long. "Can you save it?" "I can try. When do you need it? Is tomorrow too soon?" He almost smiled. "Still impatient. Still realistic," she corrected, but there was no heat in it. "Tomorrow afternoon. I'll have to work on it tonight, but I can do it." She started to pull off the blouse, then realized she was standing in the middle of his shop in her bra and dress pants. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Do you have somewhere I can back room?" He pointed to a door behind the counter, his own face slightly flushed. "There are some shirts in there you can borrow." Adrian hurried into the small office, her heart still racing. What were the odds? Boston was a big city, full of dry cleaners, and she'd walked into his. She found a plain white button-down hanging on a hook and slipped it on. It was too big, smelling faintly of detergent and something else, something that reminded her of Zachary himself. She rolled up the sleeves and tried not to think about how many nights she'd worn his shirts to bed in college, how safe and loved she'd felt wrapped in fabric that smelled like him. When she emerged, he had her blouse laid out on the counter, examining it with professional focus. "This is good silk," he said. "Italian, you know your fabrics. I should hope so, given my profession." This time he did smile, and it hit her like a physical blow. That smile had once been hers, had once greeted her every morning and sent her off to sleep every night. "I'll get this out. You can pick it up around 3 tomorrow. Thank you." She pulled out her credit card, but he waved it away, "On the house, for old time's sake." "Zachary, I can't." "You can, you will." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Let me do this, Adrian, it's just a blouse." But they both knew it wasn't just a blouse. It was an olive branch, or maybe an apology, or maybe just proof that they could still be decent to each other after all these years. She nodded, tucking her card back into her wallet. 3 tomorrow, then. 3 tomorrow. Adrian made it to her car before the emotions hit her fully. She gripped the steering wheel and forced herself to breathe steadily. Seeing him shouldn't affect her this much. It had been 10 years. She dated other men, had even gotten engaged once, though that had ended when she'd realized she was marrying someone because he looked good on paper, not because she loved him. She'd built a life, a career, an empire. She'd moved on. Except sitting there in her car, wearing Zachary's shirt, she realized she'd been lying to herself for a decade. That night, Adrian couldn't focus on work. She sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking the harbor, laptop open but ignored, mind wandering back to sophomore year of college when she'd met Zachary in an economics class neither of them had wanted to take. He'd been the architecture student fulfilling a requirement. She'd been the biology major doing the same. They'd been paired for a project and had spent more time arguing than working, until one night when the arguing had turned into laughing, which had turned into kissing, which had turned into 3 years of the kind of love that made everything else fade into background noise. She'd thought they would last forever, right up until her father had died, and she'd realized that if she didn't take over his company, his legacy would disappear. She'd needed an MBA from a top school, and Stanford had accepted her. Zachary's mother had just been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. He couldn't leave Boston. She couldn't stay. They'd tried long distance for 6 months before she'd ended it. Not because she'd stopped loving him, but because she'd loved him too much to keep him tethered to someone who was 3,000 miles away and working 18-hour days. He deserved better. He deserved someone who could be there, who could choose him first. She'd told herself it was the right decision. She'd believed it, mostly. But seeing him today had cracked something open inside her, some carefully sealed room where she'd locked away every feeling she'd ever had for him. Adrian got up and poured herself a glass of wine, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows and watching the lights of the city spread out below her. She'd achieved everything she'd set out to accomplish. Her company was thriving, employing thousands of people and developing medications that genuinely helped people. She had money and power and respect. But she came home to an empty apartment every night, and some mornings she woke up wondering if any of it had been worth the cost. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Adrian forced herself to concentrate on back-to-back meetings, on reviewing research data for their new cardiac medication, on conference calls with their West Coast division. She was professional and focused, and gave no indication that her mind kept drifting to a dry cleaning shop and the man who owned it. At 2:30, she couldn't stand it anymore. She told her assistant she had an errand to run and left early, driving to Zachary's shop with her pulse elevated. This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, a CEO, someone who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without blinking. There was no reason to be nervous about picking up a blouse. Except when she walked in and saw him smile at her, she felt like she was 21 again and everything was possible. "Perfect timing," he said, pulling her blouse out from behind the counter. It was wrapped in plastic, looking pristine and perfect. "Good as new. You're a miracle worker." She took it from him, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "Just good at my job." He paused, then seemed to make a decision. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to ask you something." "Of course." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered well. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended between us. I was angry back then, and I said some things I shouldn't have." "Zachary, you don't." "I do. You were trying to save your father's company, trying to honor his memory. I understood that intellectually, but emotionally I just felt abandoned. It wasn't fair to you." Adrian felt tears prick at her eyes. "You weren't wrong to be angry. I left when you needed me. Your mother was sick and I just left." She understood too. "She actually always liked you, you know. She used to ask about you before she passed." The tears spilled over then. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she'd died." "When?" 4 years ago. "It's okay, Adrian. How would you have known?" His voice was gentle. "We hadn't spoken in years. Still, I should have. I don't know, checked in or something. You were 3,000 miles away building an empire. Mom followed your career, actually. She was proud of you. Said you were doing exactly what you needed to do." That broke her completely. Adrian stood there in the middle of his shop, tears streaming down her face, while Zachary came around the counter and pulled her into his arms. He smelled like fabric softener and coffee, and being held by him felt like coming home after a too long journey. She let herself sink into it for just a moment, her face pressed against his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I missed you," she whispered. "God, I missed you so much." "I missed you too." They stood like that until Adrian finally pulled herself together and stepped back, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry, that was unprofessional." "Adrian, we dated for 3 years. I think we're past professional," she laughed wetly. "Fair point. Have dinner with me." The words came out in a rush, like he'd surprised himself by saying them. "Tonight, just to catch up. As friends." She knew she should say no. Getting tangled up with Zachary again would be complicated, messy, potentially destructive to the carefully ordered life she'd built. But looking into those hazel eyes, she found she didn't care. "Okay, as friends." His smile could have powered the whole city. "I'll pick you up at 7, still at." He trailed off. "I don't actually know where you live now." She gave him her address, watching his eyebrows rise. "The Harbor Towers, very fancy." "It has a nice view," she said defensively. "I bet it does." There was no judgment in his voice, just observation. "I'll see you at 7. Adrian spent the rest of the afternoon trying not to overthink everything. It was just dinner between old friends. People did this all the time. It didn't have to mean anything beyond two people who'd once cared about each other catching up after a decade apart. She changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a soft green sweater that she knew brought out her eyes. Casual but put together. Friendly but not trying too hard. She was applying lipstick when her doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock because Zachary had always been punctual. He changed, too, into dark jeans and a button-down shirt that fit him perfectly across the shoulders. He looked good. Really good. More filled out than he'd been in college, with a maturity to his features that made him even more attractive. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You look good, too." They smiled at each other, suddenly awkward, until Zachary laughed. "This is weird, right? We used to be able to talk for hours." "We'll get there," Adrian said, grabbing her purse. "Where are we going?" "I thought we'd try that new Italian place in the North End. If you're okay with Italian." "I love Italian." The restaurant was small and intimate, with checked tablecloths and candles on every table. Not exactly the just friends vibe Adrian had been preparing herself for, but she didn't protest when Zachary held her chair or when the waiter assumed they were on a date and brought them a complimentary appetizer. "So," Zachary said once they'd ordered, "tell me about being a CEO." "That's incredible, Adrian. Your dad would be so proud." "I hope so. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, but the company's doing well. We just finalized a merger that will double our research capabilities." "That's the board meeting you were coming from yesterday." "How did you know?" "You had your just survived something exhausting face on," she laughed. "I didn't know I had one of those." "You always did. Usually after finals or family dinners with your mother," Adrian groaned. "Don't remind me." "Mom still gives me that look every time I see her, the when are you getting married look." "Are you getting married, I mean?" "No, I was engaged once about 3 years ago, but it didn't work out. He was a good man, just not the right man. You?" "No, came close once too, but—" He shrugged. "Same story. Good person, wrong fit." They looked at each other across the candlelight, and Adrian wondered if he was thinking what she was thinking, that maybe they'd both been comparing everyone else to what they'd had together, that maybe nobody else had ever quite measured up. Their food arrived, giving them a reprieve from the intensity of the moment. They ate and talked about safer topics. Mutual friends from college, favorite books and movies, changes in Boston over the past decade. It was easy and comfortable and painfully familiar, like slipping on a favorite sweater that still fit perfectly. "Tell me about the dry cleaning business," Adrian said over dessert. "That's not what I expected for you. Not that it's bad," she added quickly. "I just thought you'd be designing skyscrapers." Zachary's expression turned thoughtful. "I did too for a long time. But after Mom got sick, I deferred my graduate school admission to take care of her. I needed work that was flexible, so I got a job at a dry cleaner. Turned out I was good at it." "Really good?" "The owner was getting ready to retire, and he offered to sell me the business at a price I could actually afford. I figured I'd do it for a few years, save up money, and go back to architecture." "But you didn't?" "No. Mom died and I was grieving, and the shop became this refuge. Something I could control when everything else felt chaotic. Plus I was making good money, way more than I'd expected. I expanded, hired people, opened 2 more locations. Now I own 5 shops across the city and I'm looking at franchising." Adrian stared at him. "Zachary, that's amazing. You built an empire." "I don't know about empire," he said, looking pleased but embarrassed. "But yeah, I've done well. The business brings in about $3 million a year in revenue, which isn't pharmaceutical company money, but it's enough. $3 million. That's not enough. That's extraordinary for retail services," says the woman with a penthouse apartment in the Harbor Towers. She laughed. "Fair, but seriously, I'm impressed. And your mom would be too." She was. "Before she died, I showed her the books from the first year after I bought the shop. She told me she was proud that I'd found something I was good at and passionate about, even if it wasn't what I'd originally planned. That's beautiful." "She was a beautiful person." He paused. "She asked about you near the end, wanted to know if you were happy." Adrian's throat tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know, that we hadn't spoken in years. She said she hoped you were, because you deserved it." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Are you, Adrian? Are you happy?" The question hung between them. She could lie, could give him the polished answer she gave investors and journalists and her mother. But this was Zachary, and she'd never been able to lie to him. "I'm successful," she said carefully. "I'm proud of what I've built. But happy, I don't know. I think I forgot how to be happy somewhere along the way." His thumb stroked across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." What about you? I'm content. My business is thriving, I have good friends, I stay busy. But there's something missing. Has been for a long time. They looked at each other, and Adrian felt the air between them shift into something charged and inevitable. This wasn't just old friends catching up. This was two people who'd never really let go of each other, circling around feelings that had never fully died. I should probably go, she said, not meaning it at all. It's getting late. It's 9:30. I have an early meeting. You always have an early meeting. But he signaled for the check, and they argued briefly over who would pay before agreeing to split it. Outside the restaurant, the October air was crisp and cool. Zachary walked her to where his car was parked, a sleek black Audi that spoke to his success, even if he was modest about it. They drove back to her building in comfortable silence, but when he pulled up to the front entrance, neither of them moved to get out. "Thank you for dinner," Adrian said finally. "It was really good to see you. You too. Can we do this again?" "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" She turned to look at him. "Because we're not just old friends, Zachary. We're exes. And there's all this history between us and feelings that I don't think ever really went away, and I'm afraid that if we keep seeing each other, I'm going to want things I can't have. What if I want them too?" Her heart stuttered. "Do you?" Instead of answering, he leaned across the console and kissed her. It was soft and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Adrian didn't pull away. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. He tasted like tiramisu and coffee, and kissing him felt like remembering a language she'd once been fluent in. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you walked into my shop," Zachary said. "Me too. So where does that leave us?" Adrian thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Her demanding job, his growing business, their history of hurting each other, the risk of it all falling apart again. But she also thought about how empty her life had felt, how many nights she'd lain awake wishing for something more, someone who understood her at a level deeper than small talk and business dinners. "I don't know," she admitted. "I want to see you again. I want to see where this goes." "But I'm scared, Zachary. I'm scared of losing you again." "I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of letting you walk away twice." That decided it. "Come upstairs." His eyes widened. "Adrian, just to talk, I promise. I don't want a night to end yet." He turned off the engine. Her apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Sleek and modern and expensive, with that promised view of the harbor spread out beyond the windows. But there were also unexpected touches that spoke to the Adrian he'd known. Books stacked on every surface, a soft throw blanket draped over the designer couch, framed photos of her family and friends. It was a home, not just a showpiece. "Wine," she offered. "Sure." They settled on the couch with glasses of red wine, and for a while they just talked. Really talked, in a way Adrian hadn't with anyone in years. Zachary told her about the challenges of running a business, about problem employees and supply chain issues, and the satisfaction of watching something he'd built flourish. She told him about the pressure of being CEO, about board meetings and shareholder demands, and the constant fear that she'd make one wrong decision and destroy her father's legacy. "You know what I think?" Zachary said, after she'd finished describing a particularly difficult quarter. "I think your father would tell you that you're doing an incredible job and to stop being so hard on yourself. You never even met him." "No, but I knew you, and you got that perfectionist streak from somewhere. I bet he was the same way, and I bet he worried the same way you do." "But Adrian, you took a mid-sized pharmaceutical company and turned it into a major player. That's not luck. That's skill and hard work and intelligence." She felt tears threaten again. "Why do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I know you. That hasn't changed." She set down her wine glass and moved closer to him. "I want to try this again. I know it's fast, and I know we should probably be more cautious, but I can't stop thinking about what we had and whether we could have it again." "What about your job? You're busier now than you were in grad school." "I'll make time. I'll learn to delegate better, to trust my team more. The company won't fall apart if I'm not there every minute of every day." She took his hand. "I gave up on us once because I thought I had to choose between love and success. I've spent 10 years being successful and lonely. I don't want to do that anymore." Zachary pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't tentative or questioning. It was deep and sure and full of promise. Adrian kissed him back with everything she had, 10 years of loneliness and longing pouring into the contact. His hands tangled in her hair, hers gripped his shoulders, and for the first time in a decade she felt whole. They made out on her couch like teenagers until Adrian finally pulled back, laughing and breathless. "We should slow down." "Should we?" His voice was rough, his lips swollen from kissing. "Yes, I want to do this right this time. Take it slow, not rush into anything." He groaned but nodded. "You're right, as usual, but for the record, slowing down is going to be torture. Good torture, though. The best torture." He kissed her one more time, soft and sweet. "I should go. Let you get some sleep before your early meeting." She walked him to the door, reluctant to let him leave. "When can I see you again? Are you free Saturday? I could make you dinner. I've gotten pretty good at cooking over the years." "Really? Don't sound so surprised." "I'm a man of many talents." She grinned. "Saturday sounds perfect." After he left, Adrian floated through her apartment, too energized to sleep. She felt like she'd been walking through life half awake and had finally snapped into full consciousness. Everything looked brighter, felt more alive. She was probably being foolish, probably moving too fast, probably setting herself up for heartbreak. But she didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful about something that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market shares. The next few days passed in a blur of work and text messages. Zachary sent her good morning texts that made her smile over her coffee, funny observations throughout the day, good night messages that she read and reread before falling asleep. They talked on the phone every evening, sometimes for hours, making up for lost time. Adrian's assistant noticed the change in her. "You seem happy," Margaret said carefully on Friday afternoon. "It's nice." "Is it that obvious? You've been smiling at your phone all week, so yes." Adrian laughed. "I reconnected with an old boyfriend. We're trying to figure out if we want to give it another shot." "Must have been some boyfriend." "He was. He is." She corrected herself, then smiled wider. "He's picking me up tomorrow for dinner." Margaret, who had worked for Adrian for 4 years and had never seen her boss date anyone seriously, looked delighted. "Well, it's about time you had something in your life besides work." "Don't sound too excited. I still need you." "You'll always need me," Margaret said with perfect confidence. "But you need a life too." Saturday arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp and sunny, with leaves turning gold and red on the trees. Adrian dressed carefully in jeans and a soft blue sweater, leaving her hair down and her makeup light. When Zachary picked her up, the look in his eyes told her she'd made the right choices. "You're beautiful," he said, kissing her hello. "You said that last time." "It's still true." His apartment was in a converted brownstone in Back Bay, smaller than hers but filled with character. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, modern furniture mixed with vintage pieces. It suited him perfectly. "Welcome to my humble abode," he said, taking her jacket. "I hope you like chicken." "I like anything I don't have to cook myself." He laughed and led her to the kitchen, where he'd clearly been in the middle of food preparation. She watched him work, efficient and confident, chopping vegetables and seasoning meat. He moved through the space like someone who'd spent considerable time there, and the domesticity of it all made her heart ache in the best way. "Can I help?" she offered. "You can open the wine. Glasses are in the cabinet to your left." They worked in comfortable tandem, talking and laughing, and Adrian realized this was what she'd been missing. Not just romance or physical affection, but partnership. Someone to share the small moments with, the daily rituals that made up a life. Dinner was delicious. Roasted chicken with root vegetables and a salad that actually tasted good, which she'd always struggled to achieve. They ate at his small dining table, knees bumping underneath, hands finding each other between courses. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Zachary said over dessert. "Something that's changed in the last 10 years. Adrian thought about it. "I'm not as sure of myself as I was. When I was younger, I thought I had everything figured out. Career, life, relationships. Now I know I was just naive. I've made mistakes, hurt people, failed at things. It's made me more cautious, but also, I think, more compassionate. I like that. What else? I started painting about 5 years ago. Nothing serious, just something I do to relax. I'm terrible at it, but it makes me happy. That's not something I would have expected. What about you? What's different?" He leaned back in his chair, considering. "I'm lonelier than I used to be. I have friends and a good life, but there's this persistent feeling that something's missing. I thought it was just how adult life felt, you know. But seeing you again made me realize it wasn't age or maturity. It was you. You were what was missing." Adrian felt her eyes fill with tears. "Zachary, I know we're taking this slow, and I know we have a lot to figure out. But I need you to know that these last few days, talking to you, seeing you, have been the happiest I've been in years. However this goes, whatever happens, I'm grateful for it." She got up and moved to his side of the table, settling into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. "I feel the same way. I didn't realize how much I'd just been going through the motions until you came back into my life." He held her close, his face buried in her hair. "We're going to figure this out. We're older now, smarter. We can make it work this time. I want to believe that." "Then believe it." They moved to his couch, curled up together with the last of the wine, and talked until late into the night. They talked about their fears and hopes, about what had gone wrong before and how they could avoid those same mistakes. They talked about their families and friends, their businesses and dreams. And slowly, piece by piece, they started to build something new on the foundation of what they'd once had. When Zachary finally drove Adrian home, she didn't want to leave the warm cocoon of his car. "I don't want a night to end. It doesn't have to. Come have brunch with me tomorrow. There's this place in Cambridge that makes incredible waffles. You're trying to woo me with waffles. Is it working?" She kissed him. Yes. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Dinners during the week when Adrian could get away from the office at a reasonable hour. Brunches on the weekends, followed by long walks through the city. They went to museums and movies, tried new restaurants, and spent long evenings just talking in one of their apartments. They took it slow physically, kissing and touching but not rushing into bed, both of them aware that this was too important to treat carelessly. Adrian found herself changing in small ways. She left the office earlier, delegated more to her capable team, and stopped checking emails obsessively in the evenings. Her assistant noticed, her board noticed, and surprisingly, the company didn't fall apart. In fact, her team seemed to step up when given more responsibility, and Adrian realized she'd been micromanaging out of fear rather than necessity. Zachary integrated into her life seamlessly. He charmed her mother at a difficult Sunday dinner, won over her skeptical younger sister Emma, and even impressed her board members when she brought him as her date to a charity gala the company sponsored. In his well-tailored suit, he looked every inch the successful businessman he was, and Adrian felt a surge of pride watching him navigate the corporate world with the same confidence he brought to everything else. "Your boyfriend is lovely," her mother said, pulling Adrian aside during the gala. "Much better than that banker you were engaged to. Richard wasn't that bad. He was boring. This one has life in him. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room." Adrian glanced over at where Zachary was talking with one of her board members, laughing at something the older man had said. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up and winked at her, and her heart did a little flip. "I think I love him," Adrian said quietly. "You think?" "Darling, that ship sailed a decade ago. You've always loved him. You just finally got smart enough to admit it." 2 months into their second chance, Zachary took her to dinner at a restaurant on the waterfront. It was a cold December night, the harbor dotted with boats lit up for Christmas, and Adrian was thinking about how perfect everything felt when Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, his expression serious. Her stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The opposite, actually. I got an offer this week. A major dry cleaning conglomerate wants to buy my business. All 5 locations, the brand, everything. They're offering $8 million. Adrian's eyes widened. "Zachary, that's incredible. Why don't you look happy?" "Because I'm not sure if I want to sell. I built this business from nothing. It's mine. But $8 million is life-changing money. I could do anything. Go back to architecture if I wanted, travel the world, retire at 33. What do you want to do? That's the thing. I don't know." A month ago, I would have said no without hesitation. But now, with you back in my life, I'm thinking about possibilities I'd given up on. What if I sold the business and went back to school, got my architecture degree? I'd be starting over, but I'd have you to come home to, which I didn't have before. Adrian's heart was racing. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I'm in love with you. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day of the last 10 years. And I'm saying that whatever I decide about the business, I want to decide it with you as part of my future." He squeezed her hand. "I know it's only been 2 months and maybe that's not enough time, but I love you too," she interrupted. "I've loved you the whole time. I tried to stop, tried to move on, but you were always there in the back of my mind, this standard nobody else could meet." He stood up suddenly and came around the table, pulling her to her feet and kissing her thoroughly, ignoring the amused looks from other diners. "Marry me," he said when they broke apart. She laughed breathlessly. "What, marry me? I know it's crazy and fast, but we already wasted 10 years. I don't want to waste another day. Marry me, Adrian. You don't even have a ring. I'll buy you 10 rings. 20. However many you want. Just say yes." She looked into his eyes and saw her entire future there. Saw lazy Sunday mornings and difficult conversations, and inside jokes and shared dreams. Saw children with his eyes and her stubbornness. Saw growing old together, finally getting it right after so many years of getting it wrong. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." This time when he kissed her, the entire restaurant applauded. They went back to her apartment and made love for the first time in a decade. It was different from how Adrian remembered, more intense and emotional, their bodies having changed but their connection somehow even stronger. Afterward, lying tangled together in her bed, Zachary traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'm going to take the deal," he said. "Sell the business. I've been thinking about it and I'm ready to do something new. The shops are successful, but they're not my passion. They never were." "What is your passion?" "Architecture, building things that last, creating beauty that serves a purpose." He kissed her temple. "And you're my passion too. So you'll go back to school, maybe. Or maybe I'll apprentice with a firm, learn on the job. I have options now, which is a gift. But whatever I do, I want to be able to be present in our life." I don't want to be the guy who's too busy for his wife, who misses dinner because of work, who prioritizes business over family. I need to be better about that too. I've been trying, but it's hard to break old habits. We'll figure it out together. That's what partnerships are for. They talked until dawn, making plans and dreaming out loud. Zachary would sell the business, take a few months to decide what he wanted to do next. Adrian would hire a COO to handle daily operations, freeing her up to focus on big-picture strategy and new drug development, which was what she actually loved about the company. They'd get married in the spring, something small and intimate, just close friends and family. "We should probably tell people," Adrian said as sunlight started streaming through the windows, "before someone hears it through the grapevine. Your mother is going to be insufferable. She's going to say, 'I told you so' about 100 times. She'll be right, though." Adrian propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him. "We're really doing this. We're getting married." Having second thoughts, not even for a second. "I just can't believe we found our way back to each other." "It was always going to be you," Zachary said simply. "Even when I thought I'd never see you again, it was always you." The announcement of their engagement sent ripples through their respective worlds. Adrian's business associates were surprised but pleased, having noticed the positive change in her over the past months. Zachary's friends were thrilled, several of them admitting they'd never thought he'd get over that girl from college. Her mother cried and did indeed say, "I told you so," while her sister Emma pulled Adrian aside and told her she'd never seen her happier. The sale of Zachary's business took 3 months to finalize. Adrian went with him to the signing, watching him ink the deal that would net him $8 million and completely change his life. When it was done, he took her hand and led her outside into the spring sunshine. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Terrifying, liberating, right?" He kissed her. "What do you want to do to celebrate?" "I want to go look at wedding venues. We're getting married in 6 weeks and we still haven't picked a location." They ended up choosing a small estate outside the city, with gardens full of blooming flowers and a view of rolling hills. It could hold 50 people comfortably, which was exactly how many they'd invited. No big production, no corporate networking masquerading as a celebration. Just the people they loved most, witnessing them promise forever to each other. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy but happy. Adrian threw herself into planning with an attention to detail that made Zachary laugh. He'd started working with a prestigious architecture firm, apprenticing under one of the partners, and came home every night full of enthusiasm about what he was learning. They moved into a new place together, a house in Brookline with good bones that Zachary immediately started sketching renovation ideas for. "I think I want to knock out this wall," he said one evening, gesturing at the space between the kitchen and dining room. "Open it up, make it more flowing." "Will that be expensive? I'll do most of the work myself. It'll be good practice." He pulled her close. "Besides, I want this place to be perfect for us, for our family." "Family, eventually. If you want kids, I mean." Adrian thought about it. A year ago, the idea of children had seemed impossible, something she'd have to fit in between board meetings and product launches. But now, with Zachary beside her and a future that felt full of possibility, she could picture it. A little boy with his father's hazel eyes, a little girl with her own determination. "I want kids," she said. "Maybe not right away, but yes, I want that with you." His answering smile was brilliant. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sunny and warm with a gentle breeze that made the garden flowers dance. Adrian got ready with her mother and sister, slipping into a simple but elegant dress that made her feel beautiful and like herself. No veil, no train, just clean lines and a sweetheart neckline that Zachary would love. "You look perfect," Emma said, adjusting a stray curl. "He's going to lose his mind when he sees you. I can't believe this is actually happening. Believe it. You're marrying the love of your life, and it's about time." Her mother hugged her carefully, mindful of makeup and hair. "Your father would be so proud of you, not just because of the company, but because you figured out what really matters. He'd like Zachary, wouldn't he? He'd love him. Any man who looks at you the way that one does is good in my book." The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by one of Zachary's old college professors, who'd stayed close with both of them over the years. Adrian walked down the aisle alone, not needing anyone to give her away, and met Zachary's eyes across the small space. He looked gorgeous in his suit, but it was the expression on his face that made her breath catch. Pure joy and love and promise. They exchanged traditional vows and rings, though Adrian had insisted on adding a few lines they'd written themselves. "I promise to choose you every day," Zachary said, holding both her hands, "to never let work or ambition or fear get in the way of us. To build a life with you that's full of laughter and purpose and love." "I promise to be present," Adrian said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "To make time for what matters, to never take you for granted or put anything before our partnership. To love you fiercely and completely, the way you deserve to be loved." When the professor pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Zachary kissed her deeply, and Adrian felt like everything in her life had finally clicked into place. This was what she'd been missing. Not the romance or the partnership, though those were wonderful, but the sense of completeness, of being fully herself with someone who understood and loved all of her, even the difficult parts. The reception was a joyful blur of good food, heartfelt toasts, and dancing under string lights as the sun set. Adrian's board chairman gave a speech about how the company had thrived under her leadership, but how he was even more impressed by her ability to balance success with personal happiness. Emma told embarrassing stories from their childhood that made everyone laugh. Zachary's best friend from college reminded everyone that he'd predicted from day one that Zachary and Adrian would end up married. "I just thought it would happen sooner," he added, to general laughter. When Adrian and Zachary finally had their first dance as husband and wife, he pulled her close and whispered, "How are you feeling, Mrs. Lawson?" "Perfect, though I'm keeping Peterson professionally." "I know. I'd never ask you to change it. Your name is your brand, and I'm proud of everything you've built. I couldn't have done any of it without knowing you were in my corner. I'll always be in your corner." They danced until late, celebrating with people they loved, and then snuck away to the bridal suite where they'd spend their wedding night before flying to Italy the next day for their honeymoon. Adrian stood at the window, still in her wedding dress, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different my life looks from what I planned 10 years ago. I thought I had to choose between love and success. I thought I couldn't have both. But standing here now, married to you, running a company I'm proud of, I realize I was wrong. I just had to find the right person, and I had to learn to let love in instead of always putting up walls." "I'm glad you let me in." "Me too." She turned in his arms. "I love you so much. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when I walked away. Thank you for coming back." They kissed in the moonlight, and Adrian knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments when balancing their careers and their marriage would be difficult, times when they'd have to choose each other over easier options. But they'd figure it out together, because that's what they did. They'd found each other twice now, against all odds, and she wasn't going to let go ever again. The honeymoon in Italy was magical. They spent 2 weeks exploring villages and eating incredible food and making love in beautiful hotel rooms with views of the Mediterranean. They talked about the future, about Zachary's architecture dreams and Adrian's plans for the company. They talked about children and where they wanted to live and what kind of life they wanted to build together. "I want to design our house," Zachary said one evening as they sat on a terrace overlooking the Amalfi Coast. "Not renovate the one we bought, but actually design something from scratch, something that's completely ours." "That sounds perfect. Where would we build it?" "Somewhere outside the city, maybe, with land where kids could run around. Close enough that you could get to the office when needed, but far enough that we felt like we had space to breathe." Adrian imagined it. A beautiful modern house designed by her husband, filled with children and laughter and love. It was such a different vision from the sleek penthouse apartment she'd been living in, the one that had felt more like a hotel than a home. But it was a vision she desperately wanted. "Let's do it," she said. "When we get home, let's start looking for land." His answering kiss tasted like wine and promises. They returned to Boston tanned and relaxed and deeply in love. Adrian went back to work with renewed energy, finally having found the balance she'd been seeking. She hired a talented COO named Jennifer who took over day-to-day operations, freeing Adrian to focus on research and development, which was where her heart really lay. The company continued to thrive, their newest cardiac medication earning FDA approval and promising to help millions of people. Zachary threw himself into his architecture apprenticeship, working long hours but coming home energized rather than drained. He'd found his calling again, and watching him sketch and plan and dream reminded Adrian of the young man she'd fallen in love with in college. Except now, he had experience and maturity and a business acumen that made his designs not just beautiful but practical and achievable. They found land in Concord, about 30 minutes outside Boston. 5 acres of rolling property with mature trees and a small pond. Zachary immediately started sketching their dream house, showing Adrian each iteration and incorporating her feedback. It would be modern but warm, with lots of windows to let in natural light, an open floor plan for family gatherings, and a home office for each of them. "And here," he said, pointing to a section of the blueprint, "would be the nursery, or nurseries if we end up with more than one kid." Adrian looked at the plans, at the life he was literally drawing for them, and felt overwhelmed with love. "It's perfect. You're perfect." Construction began that fall. Zachary worked closely with the builders, often spending his weekends at the site to oversee the work. Adrian joined him when she could, the two of them walking through the skeleton of their future home and imagining how it would look when finished. "The kitchen will go here," Zachary said, gesturing to a large open space. "Big island where we can cook together and where the kids can do homework while we make dinner. You've really thought about this. I've been thinking about it for 10 years, building a life with you. I just didn't think I'd actually get to do it." They stood there in the half-finished house, surrounded by exposed beams and construction dust, and Adrian had never felt more hopeful about the future. The house was completed the following summer, nearly a year and a half after their wedding. Moving in felt like a new chapter, the physical manifestation of the life they'd been building together. Adrian stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes but filled with joy, and knew she was finally home. That night, lying in bed in their new bedroom with windows overlooking the pond, Zachary pulled her close. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "I got a call today from that architecture firm. They want to make me a junior partner. It's a big promotion, and it means I'd be working on major projects across the region." "Zachary, that's incredible. There's more. They specifically want me to lead the design for a new children's hospital. It's a massive project, the kind of thing that could define my career." Adrian could hear the excitement in his voice, but also something else. But it would mean long hours for the next few years. Not as bad as it could be since I'd be a partner and have more control over my schedule, but still demanding. And I know we've been talking about starting a family, and I don't want to be an absent father. She propped herself up on her elbow, looking at him in the moonlight filtering through their windows. "First of all, take the partnership. You've earned it, and designing a children's hospital is meaningful work that would make a real difference. Second, we'll figure out the family timing together. Maybe we wait another year or two until the project is more established. Or maybe we start trying now and just deal with being tired together. Either way, we make it work. You're sure?" "I'm sure. I spent too much of my life thinking I had to sacrifice one thing for another, but I've learned that with the right partner, you can have both. It might be messy and chaotic, but we'll figure it out." He kissed her deeply. "Have I mentioned lately that I'm wildly in love with you? You might have said something along those lines." They made love in their new house, in the bedroom Zachary had designed specifically for them, and Adrian felt like every piece of her life had finally fallen into place. Zachary accepted the junior partnership, and work on the children's hospital began that fall. He came home some nights exhausted, but there was a light in his eyes that had been missing before. He was doing what he loved, building something that would last and that would help people. Adrian understood that drive intimately. Her own company had just acquired a smaller pharmaceutical startup that specialized in rare diseases. It was the kind of project that would have consumed her completely a few years ago, but now she managed to keep perspective. She worked hard during the day but came home at reasonable hours. She delegated to her talented team and trusted them to handle things in her absence. And she made sure that she and Zachary had time together, even if it was just cooking dinner and watching a movie before falling into bed exhausted. On their second anniversary, Adrian had news. She'd been feeling off for a few weeks, tired and slightly nauseous, and had finally taken a pregnancy test that morning. Positive. She told Zachary over dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first date during their second chance. He stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. "Are you serious? We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He got up and pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of the restaurant, and kissed her while people around them smiled. "This is the best anniversary present ever. Better than the watch I got you, so much better." The pregnancy was surprisingly easy. Adrian felt tired but otherwise good, and the excitement of preparing for their baby kept both of them energized. They turned one of the rooms in their house into a nursery, Zachary insisting on building the crib himself. Adrian's mother was thrilled, already buying baby clothes and toys despite being told to wait until they knew the sex. "I can't help it," she said when Adrian protested the amount of stuff showing up at their house. "I'm going to be a grandmother. I'm allowed to be excited." They found out at 20 weeks that they were having a boy. Zachary cried when the ultrasound technician told them, his hand gripping Adrian so tight she thought her bones might break. They named him after Adrian's father, James, with Zachary's middle name, James Zachary Lawson. He was born on a snowy January morning, 6 pounds and perfect. Adrian held him while Zachary cut the cord, both of them crying and laughing and completely overwhelmed. Their son had Zachary's eyes and Adrian's determined chin, and from the moment she looked at him, she knew she'd never love anything as much as she loved this tiny person. "We made him," she said wonderingly as Zachary sat beside her on the hospital bed, his arm around her shoulders while they both stared at their son. "We made him," Zachary agreed. "He's perfect. The first few months were hard. James was a good baby, but any baby required constant attention. Adrian took maternity leave, her first real break from work in over a decade. Zachary adjusted his hours, working from home more and delegating what he could so he could be present for his family. They were exhausted and covered in spit-up more often than not, but they were happy. Adrian's COO Jennifer handled things beautifully at the company, checking in regularly but making it clear that Adrian could take all the time she needed. "The company will still be here when you get back," Jennifer said during one of their calls. "Your son is only going to be a baby once." It was exactly what Adrian needed to hear. She let herself sink into motherhood, into the overwhelming love and exhaustion and joy of it. She let Zachary handle things when she needed a break, and she returned the favor when he was at the end of his rope. They figured out how to be parents together, the same way they'd figured out everything else, with communication and compromise and lots of love. When James was 6 months old, Adrian went back to work part-time. It was an adjustment, but having the right support systems in place made all the difference. They hired a wonderful nanny named Margaret who came to the house during the day. Adrian's mother helped out regularly, thrilled to have time with her grandson. And Zachary rearranged his schedule to be home by 6 every evening, no matter what was happening at work. "I missed so much time with my mom before she died," he said one evening as they gave James his bath together. "I'm not missing this. My son is going to know his father, not just live with some guy who's too busy to be present. You're an amazing dad. I'm learning. We both are." By James's first birthday, they'd settled into a rhythm. Adrian was working 4 days a week at the office and 1 from home, staying on top of the company's direction without sacrificing family time. Zachary's Children's Hospital project was nearly complete, a beautiful modern building that would serve thousands of kids and their families. They hosted a small party for James's birthday at their house, surrounded by family and friends, and Adrian looked around at the life they'd built and felt nothing but gratitude. That night, after everyone had gone home and James was asleep in his crib, she and Zachary collapsed onto their couch. "Successful party," he said, pulling her against his side. "Very, though I think your mother fed him way too much cake. She's allowed to spoil her grandson." Adrian laughed, then turned serious. "Can I tell you something, always? 10 years ago, when I walked away from you to go to business school, I thought I was making the right choice. I thought success meant sacrificing everything else. But lying here now, in this house you designed, with our son sleeping upstairs and a career I love, I realize I was wrong. I didn't have to sacrifice anything. I just had to be patient enough to find my way back to you." Zachary kissed the top of her head. "We found our way back to each other. That's what matters. You ever regret it, selling your business, starting over with architecture? Not for a second. I'm doing what I love with a person I love, raising a kid I love. That's not sacrifice. That's just life being good." "Life being good," Adrian repeated. "I like that." They sat there in comfortable silence, both of them exhausted but content. The future stretched out ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges and love. There would be hard days and difficult decisions and moments when they'd have to choose each other over easier options. But Adrian knew they'd figure it out, because that's what they did. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Emma Rose, named after Adrian's sister and Zachary's mother. She had her mother's determination and her father's easy smile, and from the moment James met his baby sister, he was completely devoted to her. "Baby Emma," he'd say proudly to anyone who would listen. "My baby." Their house filled with laughter and noise and love. Adrian cut back her hours at work even more, realizing that Jennifer was more than capable of handling the CEO role. She transitioned to chairman of the board, overseeing strategy but letting someone else manage the daily operations. It was the right move, both for the company and for her family. Zachary's career flourished. After the children's hospital, he was asked to design a community center in a low-income neighborhood, then a public library, then a series of affordable housing developments. His work was featured in architecture magazines, and he was invited to speak at conferences. But he always made time for family dinners and bedtime stories and lazy Sunday mornings. On their 5th anniversary, they returned to the restaurant where everything had begun again. James and Emma were with Adrian's mother for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. 5 years, Adrian said, raising her wine glass. It feels like both forever and no time at all. To 5 more, Zachary said, clinking his glass against hers. And 5 after that, and every 5 after that until we're old and gray. We're going to be those annoying old people who are still holding hands everywhere. I'm counting on it. They ordered the same dishes they'd had on their first date 5 years earlier, laughing at how much had changed since then. They'd been cautious and hopeful, both afraid of getting hurt again but unable to resist the pull between them. Now they were married with 2 kids and successful careers, and a life that exceeded every dream Adrian had ever allowed herself to have. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Adrian asked. "You asked if I was happy." "I remember. You said you were successful, but you'd forgotten how to be happy. I'm happy now, completely, overwhelmingly happy. Some days I wake up and can't believe this is my life." Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. "It's our life. We built it together. Best decision I ever made, saying yes to dinner with you." "Second best," he corrected. "Best decision was saying yes when I proposed in this very restaurant." "Fair point." They finished dinner and drove home through the city, then out to Concord where their house glowed warm and welcoming in the night. The next morning, they'd wake up to their kids climbing into bed with them, demanding breakfast and attention. There would be work emails and client meetings and parent-teacher conferences. There would be laundry and grocery shopping and all the mundane details that made up a life. But there would also be love. So much love that sometimes Adrian felt like her heart couldn't contain it all. Love for Zachary, who'd been patient enough to wait for her to find her way back to him. Love for their children, who taught her that success wasn't measured in quarterly earnings but in good-night kisses and proud smiles. Love for the life they'd built together, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. Standing in their bedroom watching Zachary get ready for bed, Adrian thought about the girl she'd been 10 years ago. So certain she had to choose between love and success. So convinced that having both was impossible. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, it would be simple. Just wait. The right person is worth waiting for, and the right life is one you build together. Zachary caught her looking at him and grinned. "What are you thinking about?" "How much I love you, how grateful I am that we found each other again." "Found each other, chose each other, fought for each other." He pulled her close. "We did all of it and we'll keep doing it for the rest of our lives. Promise?" "I promise. You're stuck with me, Adrian Lawson. For better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health." "We already said those vows." "I know, but I like reminding you of them." They climbed into bed and Adrian curled against his side the way she had 1,000 times before. Outside, snow was starting to fall, dusting their property in white. Inside, their children slept soundly in rooms Zachary had designed specifically for them. And here in their bedroom, in the house that was the physical manifestation of their love and commitment, Adrian felt nothing but peace. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. It had turned out better. Because she'd learned that the best plans were the ones you made with someone you loved, the ones that were flexible enough to accommodate dreams you didn't even know you had. She'd learned that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. And she'd learned that sometimes the greatest love of your life was someone you'd already met, someone who'd been waiting patiently for you to realize what you'd lost. Zachary had been her first love and her only love, and she'd been foolish enough to walk away once. But she'd been smart enough to stay when she got a second chance, and that made all the difference. As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, in the house he'd built for their family, Adrian smiled. The CEO who'd run into her ex 10 years later had discovered something more valuable than any merger or acquisition. She discovered that her ex had always been the one and always would be. And that was the best business decision she'd ever made.